In the last 8 videos, we've learned the basics of React, and you might find yourself very confused about a lot of things. We've talked about props and state, we've used refs, and we've used JSX in the render method. All of these can be very confusing to understand at first. Now, if this course only had one project, that'd be unfortunate because you wouldn't get a real chance to experience how these things fit into a real-world app. But lucky for you, we're going to be working through a ton of projects in this course. So if things still seem a little confusing or you don't understand why you would use one thing over the other, like when do you use props versus state, I promise as we move through our apps, things will become clearer and you'll see where all the pieces fall into the puzzle that lets you build your web app. Now in this video, we do have a goal. We're going to be adding nested components to our greeter application. Right now, our app has one component that does everything. It's responsible for 1, maintaining state, 2, displaying information to the user, like hello Andrew, and this is the default message, and 3, it's responsible for displaying a form that allows the user to update the state. Now this might be fine for a smaller project like this one, but as our React apps get more complex, you're going to want to pull out your one component into multiple components, and that's what we're going to do here. It might seem like overkill for this particular case, but it's important to see how you can nest components while the components are still simple. If we only do nesting when we move to more complex apps, it's going to take us longer to wrap our head around why and when you would nest your components. So to kick things off, we're going to take a look at our app. I've created a little screenshot and added a few borders. So the red border is going to be our greeter component. It's going to be the main application. There's going to be nothing above it. And it's going to have 2 nested components. The first one in green is going to be our greeter message component. And this is going to display the message to the user in the browser. The second nested component is going to be called our greeter form component, and this component is going to be responsible for getting new information via our input and button fields. To kick things off, in this video, we're going to go ahead and create static versions of the blue and green component. We're going to display them in our app, although they won't actually do anything, so they're not going to be able to update information or display new information, and that's fine. The goal here is to learn how to nest components. In the next video, we're going to continue on with nesting and we'll wire up the app so it works just like it works right now, where typing in a new name and hitting enter or the button updates what's displayed above. To kick things off, I'm going to move over into Atom and we're going to start by creating our first component that we're going to nest inside of our greeter component. Down below, we have our H1 and P tags. We're going to go ahead and pull this out into a new component that's capable of rendering the name and the message. So to get started, up at the very top of the file, we want to define a component just like we do right here. So what I'm going to do is make a new variable called greeter message, and I'm going to set it equal to react.createClass, just like this. And with this in place, the only thing we know we have to define is our render method. Remember, every React component needs to have a render method. And inside of here, we're going to return. I'm going to open and close my parentheses and hit enter inside. And now we can start adding our JSX code. And the only thing we want to do is have our div. Then we're going to have some h1 tag, some h1. For now, I'm just going to leave little notes so we can make sure everything's getting displayed properly. And we're also going to have our P tag just below it, some paragraph. Perfect. Now we have a component, and it is static, meaning it doesn't use any data at all, but we can now learn how to add it into the greeter component. And we do it just like we do down inside of React DOM.render. We simply reference it, replacing the tag name with the component name. So just below the P tag, in our greeter component, I want you to type the following. I'm going to open up my tag and type greeter message. And for now, since we're working with a static example to explore nesting, I'm going to close the tag, leaving off any props. Now, if I save this file and refresh the browser, you can see a few things. First of all, our regular app is still here, but we also have some H1 and some paragraph. They're being rendered to the browser via our greeter message component, which is awesome. Eventually, this code right here, some H1 and some paragraph, is going to be what we see in green over here in our graph. So we have one component moved into a nested component. We also want to break out our form. Inside of React, we want to make sure every component is responsible for one thing and one thing only. In this case, greeter message is responsible for displaying the message, and greeter form is going to be responsible for displaying a form that allows the user to set a new name. And that's going to be the challenge for this video. All you need to do is make a static component under greeter message, call it greeter form, and have it render the same form information right here. Now, there won't be an onSubmit handler yet, so you can go ahead and delete this from the greeter form component. And then just below form, simply render it to the screen. And when you view it in the browser, you should have our first message, our second message, our first form, and our second form. And remember, at this point, the form isn't going to do anything, and that is perfectly fine. The goal here is to simply create the components, so in the next video, we can wire everything up. So go ahead and create the greeter form component. Remember, it's just going to be a static component that renders this form without the onSubmit attribute. From there, go ahead, refresh the browser after nesting it right here. Make sure everything shows, and if it does, congratulations, you've succeeded. Take a moment to pause the video, try this out, and when you're done, click play. To kick things off, up above, just below greeter message, I'm going to make a new variable called greeter form. I'm going to set it equal to react.createClass. Now, react.createClass takes a options object, and the only method we have to define is render. I'm going to set render equal to an anonymous function that doesn't take any arguments. I'm going to start things off by returning empty parentheses. And inside of here, I can define my JSX. For now, all I need to do is go below, copy the form code, scroll up to the top, and paste it right inside of my parentheses. And since we are creating a static component, for the time being, I'm going to remove my event handler. And now we have our static component ready to go. It's called greeter form, and we can use it below in the greeter component. At the very bottom, before we close our root div tag, I'm going to open up a new tag called greeter form, just like this, save the file, and refresh the browser. And here you can see exactly what we expected. We have our first messages, which are being displayed in the greeter component. We have the static messages from our greeter message component. We have our first form, which is wired up inside of greeter, and we have our second form, which is currently static. Now, nothing works so far. If I type a name into this second input field and hit set name, it's not going to change the text right here. That's a job for the second video. But at this point, we're ready to get moving. So I'm going to quickly recap what we learned in this video, and then we'll move on, wire all of this up, and remove the duplicate forms and the duplicate messages. Inside of Atom, we created two new static components. We used react.createClass and simply defined a render method that didn't rely on any props or state. All it does is it displays the same text no matter what, and this is fine when you're plotting out your complex applications. It's best to make static versions of them first. Then, once you have the static versions, you can wire up the functionality that lets them talk to each other. We also have our greeter form component down below, which displays a simple form, and we were able to use them inside of the greeter component's render method by simply referencing them by name. This is just like what we did in React DOM.render. It's nothing different. In the future, we're going to be passing props into greeter message and greeter form, but for now, since we're working with a static example, we're not. All right, that's it for this video. Nesting components is as simple as making a new one and referencing it by its name. I'll see you next time where we're going to continue working with this example, pulling out this code and this code completely and relying on the greeter message and greeter form components themselves. All right, I'll see you next time.